So to get the character to look at some point in the world, we first need a point that he's going to look at. So I'll just create a new actor. So I'll go to the content folder, right click, and we'll do new blueprint class, just a regular actor. I'll call it look at target. And we double click on that, open it up. We're just going to add some placeholder here just so we can see it when we're moving it around. So I'll just add a sphere. That should do. We can close that. Oops. Okay, so in our character blueprint, so in third person blueprints BP third person character, I'm going to do this on tick, so that will run every frame, every update of the character. That's not an ideal way to do it, and we will be changing it later, but just for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to run it on tick. So do event tick, and we're going to get all actors of class to get a list of all the actors of a specific class. The class that we're going to use is that look at target. So just search for look at target. And we're only going to have one for this example. So we've got an array of all of the look at targets here. I'm just going to drag out from that and do get a reference to 0. So that's the first one in this list. Now we're going to get the actor location. And we're going to promote this to a variable. So drag out from the return value, which is the location, promote to variable, connect the execution path so it goes event tick, get all actors of class, and then set. I'll rename this from new var to look at location. Okay, so we're constantly saving the look at location in the third person character. Now what we want to do is open up the animation blueprint. So that's in our hybrid course, hybrid anim BP. And this is in the animation graph where you pass the animations into the output. But if you go to event graphs, you should see that up at the top at a tab, or you can see it here under graphs. So just double click on that. This is all the inbuilt stuff. We're going to ignore most of that. The event blueprint update animation, this runs every time the animation updates. So you can think of that as just every frame. So on this sequence, it runs through 0, then 1, then 2, and however many we add to it. So we don't want to mess with any of this. We'll just leave that as it is. We'll just add a new pin to this sequence. And what we do after this, we'll execute after all of whatever this is. And what we want to do is we want to get our actor, which is our character, and then we want to access this look at location variable. And then that allows us to pass it through the animation graph and then into control rig. But currently, we only have our character as a character actor. Our character is more specific than that. It's not just a character, it's a BP third person character. So it's lower in the hierarchy. A BP third person character is a character, which is an actor, but this is a more specific version that has this variable that we've added. So up at the top, you'll see blueprint initialize animation. And this just runs when the animation graph or the event graph sort of initializes. So it's the equivalent of sort of begin play from regular blueprints. So what we're going to do, it's getting the owning actor, so whoever owns this animation instance, casting it to a character class, and then promoting that to a variable. What we're also going to do is we're going to cast it again from this character class, do cast to, and then we want third person character. We're going to connect that into the chain, and we'll promote this to a variable, and we can leave the name default. So now we've got a reference to our owning actor as a third person character. So what this allows us to do down here, so this is again on the blueprint update animation, as BP third person character do, you can drag that in and do get. Now we can do get look at location. And with this look at location, we can promote this to a variable. And that's promoting it to a variable within the animation blueprint. So we've already got it as a variable there, but to make it a variable that the anim graph can access, we want to promote it to a variable in here. So promote that, we can leave the name as look at location and just make sure that's connected. So I've done it on then free. So every time the graph updates or the event graph updates, it's doing all this, whatever that is. We're not going to look at that for now. Oh, probably at any point. And then it runs through all that, and then it promotes, well, it's updating this look at location from the look at location that it's got from the third person character. So you can just compile, save. Now in the animation graph, we're going to want to pass this look at location through control rig. So that's our control rig class, not this one that was pre-existing. So we drag in look at location and do get. And now we need somewhere to plug this in. So what we do is we open the control rig class up, double click on that. Go to the My Blueprint tab. Under variables, we need to create a new variable, which is where we're going to pass that information through. So create a new variable. This is going to be a vector because it's a 3D position, X, Y, and Z. Rename this to look at target. Compile. Now click on that variable, and on the right in the details panel, you should see instance editable, and you just want to tick that. That means that we can edit the instance of this from control rig from the animation graph. So back to the animation graph. So in our hybrid anim BP anim graph, if you select the control rig node, you should now see on the right details panel, input, under the input section, look at target. And now we can tick use pin. And when we do that, you'll see that the control rig node updates and we've got this input for look at target. So we're just going to plug in the look at location into the look at target input, compile. And now nothing's going to happen currently because we're not actually using this. If we go back to the control rig class, instead of using this control point, so this control point is what he's actually looking at using the aim node. Instead of using this vector, we'll use this vector we've just passed in, so the look at target. So drag that in, get look at target, plug that into the target for the primary axis. And you'll see that by default, his head looks to, it's going to 0, 0, 0 because this has no default value. Well, it does have a default value of 0, 0, 0. But when we're in the actual game, the third person character should be finding a look at target if one exists in the level. Getting a reference to the first one that it finds. Promoting that passes through the event graph of the animation blueprint. That passes through the animation graph. Did I say event graph for this one? I meant event graph. I said anim graph. Whatever. And then this passes through the anim graph into control rig, and then control rig uses that. So if we go to the level now, and we first will drag in our target. So that's just in the content folder. Look at target, the sphere thing that we created. I'm pressing W just to move this around. What I'll do is I'll get our third person character blueprint. So that's in third person blueprints folder. Drag the character in. I'll put this object somewhere in front. And now when we simulate, so I'm pressing this to simulate, you'll see that, well, it's not looking at in the right direction at all. It is relative to this somehow, because if we see we're moving it around and his head's moving. So it obviously has some understanding that it's trying to look at this object, but it's in the completely wrong direction. Now, the reason for that is this information that we passed in from the third person character, it's getting the actor location, and that actor location is its place in the world. So that's the entire level of the game. So that's whatever this value is here when you've got it selected. So when I move that around, you'll see these numbers are changing. So it's trying to aim at that position. However, control rig only cares about things relative to the character. So the way this works is when it's in the level, this is in world space. So the world is the actual game level. Whereas control rig only cares about the coordinate system relative to the character, and that is called rig space. So within rig space, the 0, 0, 0 is just here under the character, the center of the character below. And everything we do in control rig wants it to be in rig space. So it's all relative to this character. So just think of it as from this character's perspective. Wherever he is in the world, it doesn't know where he is. It doesn't know where the character's actual position is. That's not relevant to it at all. All it cares about is what's going on relative to the rig, which is the character mesh. So instead of just having this look at target, which is a value in world space of this object, what we want to do is make that a value that correlates to rig space, so make it relative to the character's world coordinate system. So what we do for that is we just drag out from the look at target and do from world, and this converts it from the world space coordinate system to rig space coordinate system relative to the character. So I'll just plug that in to where it was going, into the target, compile. And now when we simulate, you'll see he's looking at our target. And we can move that around and he keeps looking at it. And the inverse of that node is I'll just stop simulating for a second, is a to world. So you can do from world to convert it from world space to rig space. And if for any reason you want to convert a value from rig space back to world space, you do the to world node. And an example of why you might want to do that, let's say you wanted to lock one of his feet in place. So you've moved it around in rig space, but you want to lock that relative to the world. So wherever you drag the character to, his foot is stuck in one place, or his arm's attached to something in world space. Then what you would do is, within control rig, you could save the position in world space. So you'd get let's say, get transform of his hand, which would be in rig space, convert it to a world space value, and then save that. And then you would always have a saved version of where that hand was when you saved it in relative to the world. So even though the character's moving, that value, that variable that you've saved would be relative to the world and not be dragged along with the character. So anyway, now we have the character looking towards this point. And if I just play in the editor, you'll see that the character I'm playing as is also looking towards that point. And you may start to notice a slight issue with this. He's doing some Exorcist thing. I think it's The Exorcist. Whatever film that is, where the head turns around, but it's just always looking at it no matter what. So we're going to add some limits to prevent the character from always just staring at that. But first what we'll do is we're going to make it so it's a bit more of a hybrid approach rather than just rotating one bone to point at the target. We're going to add some animation to it as well. So as it is currently, it's just his head bone rotates. And you can imagine that if you're looking at something that's 90 degrees to your right, you're not just moving the head. Like for a start, your neck's going to be moving if the head's moving. But also you're probably going to be moving your upper chest, so your shoulders will be turning clockwise as well to look towards the target, and so on. And we could do that procedurally. So we could, for example, do the same logic that we've done for the head using the aim node, but we could apply that to the chest, and we could just make the chest slightly point in the direction of the target and so on. But what we would get the benefit from doing a hybrid approach using keyframed animation is we can be a lot more detailed with how it looks when the character turns around. So for example, his arms might move slightly because he's turning to the right. He's rotating his shoulders, he's rotating his upper arm, his lower arm, maybe his hands rotate, maybe his pelvis slightly, and so on. And we can control all of that by making a simple blend from one position to another. So we'll just do him looking far to the right, then far to the left, and we'll choose which position in that animation we're going to use based on the direction his head's facing. So in this case, because he's looking fully to the right, we'll be using one end of the animation where his body's twisted looking towards the right. And to do that, we're going to, of course, need to actually set up that animation. So it's just a blend from one position to another, but we're doing it as an animation so that we get full control over how it looks throughout the whole process. So it's just a gradual change from looking left to